Okay, and welcome back to Zoink TV. I'm Andrew Weir, and this is part of the character creation tutorial series in Blender 2.68. And in this tutorial, we're going to look at what we just saw in the render. It was a bit of a dimly lit render, and also I used low samples, so it looks a bit pixelated or whatever. But we can see what it looks like. We can see what we're going to make in this tutorial, and here it is in object mode. So that's basically what we're going to make, and it's not the most detailed clothing. I didn't do any textures for it, I only did them with nodes, so we'll look at that in a bit. The actual leather texture is made with nodes that we saw in the render, and we should get through it all in the tutorial, which is why it's looking pretty basic. For instance, this little metal joint here, it's really flat, it's made out of a cube, it's clearly, it should look a little bit different to that, but when we actually wanted to make this for ourselves, we could do it outside of the tutorial and we'd have more time to do it. So I'm just going to talk about a little bit and get through the most important things of making this, because we can't make it in the same way that I've been showing you throughout the series, because we need surface snapping. Because if I look at the actual edit mode of this, then we can see that the actual leather strap here is going diagonally down. So in my other tutorials we see duplicating off the mesh and then creating it like that. But if we're going to be doing this, we're going to need surface snapping, and then when we're adding all this stuff in, I'll talk about some things that can make it look a little bit more realistic, when actually it's incredibly basic and maybe even a little bit lazy. But again, quick tutorial, so whatever you do here is just to be as an example, and when you actually design your own clothing it might not be the same as this. So, for example, if I go into edit mode on the metal, we can see that we've got a little subdivided ring here, and there's no actual joint between the buckle and the ring because it's just extruded out to fake the look of it being joined. I'm sure you didn't notice it. It was definitely a low light render, but that's just the kind of thing that I mean when I say in this tutorial we're not going too far into the details. And so, with that said, I think we can just delete this, and I'm going to start with this scene. So you can check out the rest of the series if you want. We continue to use this base mesh mail made by the Blended Cookie people, so you can go and check out that link in the description. And what we can do is just hide these lamps because we don't need them at the moment, and I think I'll hide the camera just so things don't get in the way. And this is the kind of scene that you should be seeing with a little bit of moving around. And from this point, use your own mesh if you have one, because we're obviously working on our own characters, so you should use that. But what we're going to do is we're going to add a plane, which I'm going to rotate on the x-axis by 90, and I'm going to go through the actual moving around pretty quickly because you should know how to scale, rotate, so on. But I can turn on screencast keys, make that just a little bit easier. Screencast keys is an add-on, so search that. And what I'm going to do is I'm in edge select mode even. What we can do is we can see that the ring that I was going to make was starting here, so I know that this should be roughly from the front view, and press 5 to remove perspective. From the front view it should be diagonal to go around the shoulder. So scale that down just to the right thickness. And then I'm going to give myself a ring to work off before we actually do this, because I don't know how far to go around. But if I take a look at this and we see from the side view that we want to snap this to the body, because it's a bit too far away at the moment, we can just click this little magnet here. We can choose where we want it to snap to face, snap to edge, vertices. I'm going to do volume, and it's going to be the median or center of the shape that we're selecting. So that's going to be mostly just vertices and edges, but I can do face here. And if I grab it on the y-axis, it's only going to move back on the y until it hits, or if I, wait, I'll snap to faces. If I go into front view, grab this, then that will be snapped like that. But at the moment, if I just mess around with the settings a little bit, we should be able to get a better result. Like that. So we can see that by turning off these settings, or turning on these settings, we can see that the vertices have moved to be in line with how it is in the, rather than just like generally the same rotation, which just makes it look a lot better. So, alright, you'll see what I mean here when I go into front view again. We can extrude up. We can keep extruding roughly the same distances. It doesn't matter too much because we're not going to be adding any detail in here. It's just we want a curve around, and we can see what this is doing. Snapped right to it, which is good. I'm going to bring this around the shoulder. We might need to do a little bit of rotating to bring it around here because we can't just keep going straight. And now we've reached this point here, we can press Ctrl 3, and I am going to add in that. I'm going to add in the ring that I was talking about, so I may as well do that now. I'll add it on a different object, but I'll snap this to the center, which is where it was. Snap the cursor to the selected, and now I'll Shift A to add a circle. Way too detailed at the moment, so what we're going to do is, because we know we're going to subdivide this, so what I'm going to do is bring this down to 8, which is a good number because I know that I don't want it to be too low poly because I'm only using this for an example. But if you want to be more low poly, go for another even number, maybe 6 is the lowest, as long as you make it an even number. Or you can make it an odd number if you want and go all the way down to 5, but I like to use even numbers. And what we're going to do is we're going to rotate this on the x90 just like we did before, scale it in, and it should roughly be where, and I'm going to turn off snapping for this, it's going to be roughly where the plane was, which we can't see anymore because it's actually inside the mesh somewhere here. But anyway, we don't want to snap this because it's a circle, it's a metal circle, it's not going to be tightly wrapped around the body because it's made out of metal. So I'm going to rotate it just a little bit like it is actually resting on the body, and then I'm going to extrude it, and then I'm going to scale it, and then we can select the other outside ring loop with Alt and click, and Shift to select multiple, and then I can extrude this out just a little bit, depends how thick I want it to be. I guess that's okay once it's going to be subdivided, and let's go ahead and subdivide that now in the modifiers. Subdivision surface, smooth shading, we'll view 2 of them. I'm going to add a little bit more detail in there with the ring loops. What I wanted was it to be flat or flatter around here, so that's just adding in another ring loop and then not moving it at all. And now I want it to be more inwards on the inside, so let's go ahead and add the ring loop there once we get the right point. So Control R for ring loops, and scale that in, and that's the kind of shape that I got from the previous one, but we can probably add in ring loops there if we wanted to make it more defined and more flat, but I think I want it more rounded, so I'm going to keep it like that. And that's not too bad. If we did want it thicker or bigger, then we can just edit that later. So I'm going to go ahead and find this right there. And we can see that they're not quite in the right place, so what I'm going to do is just quickly bring this down, and it should be about there. And now that I've done that, I'm going to just quickly join them together. So let's go ahead, Control J, it should unsubdivide that, kind of the way that I've joined them. And we're going to go and subdivide it later. So back into edit mode, I'm just messing around with how I want it to be done. Back into edit mode, and I think we can go to the back view now, so Control 1 for the back view, out of wireframe, and continue to extrude with the surface snapping on. So I just turn it back on, and oops, I apparently have that selected down there, so I'm going to go ahead and just like that. So Control 1, and continuing. And when I actually made this, I wanted an area around here that actually covered where they join. So last time I just made it so they all just join, but I wanted kind of an extra bit of leather that goes over it just to make it look a little bit better. And I think I haven't gone far enough down here, so what I'm going to do is bring it down. It's going to go all the way down, and I'm going to ignore the fact that there's another one going around the top of the shoulder, because we're going to extrude that out of one of these sides, so it doesn't matter at the moment. We're just going to keep going until we get to a good position. Might need to just rotate it a little bit, but once it's subdivided it looks a lot smoother, so nobody's going to notice. And we're going around here. I'm going to not go into any of the side views while I do this, because the arm will be in the way. Extrude more. And I want it to go right back to the metal circle. Leaving a little distance because I'm going to have to edit it all in a bit, and I might just tediously make this more of a circle, or more of a, not more of a circle, more rounded around here. You know, just messing around with how I want it to look. And when it's subdivided, again, it will look a lot better. So I'm going to subdivide that now. And we're going to extrude it to give it a little bit more thickness. But subdividing, that's fine. And now for the top shoulder bit. So let's pick the right one, which we want. Let's say I want it to be joined at that point there, so I'm going to grab that, Control 1 again, and we'll extrude it. So this is basically the new thing to the tutorial series. It's really basic, but it's surface snapping, and we want it to be snapped so that we can do this. And it's got more uses than just making clothing, obviously. There's a thing where you would remodel a high poly model, and that would allow you to make it low poly from high poly if you're using surface snapping. So if you have gone overboard with the vertexes, or you've made something in ZBrush maybe, then you can go ahead and check out Remesh and, you know, start using surface snapping. Or I was looking at this Blender Cookie video that's fairly recent to this one I'm posting now, and they've actually created a really good tool where you cut straight across any mesh that you've made. That just allows you to make stuff really quickly. So this is just a little bit too thick at the moment, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to think of the best way to select just that, which is obviously wireframe, and circle box select even. Box select across here. And now I'm going to scale this. Let's see if I can do anything like No, that's not going to work. Okay, I'll keep it to the thickness that it's at. Let's just bring them into, I think this circle's a little bit too small at the moment, so I'm going to grab the correct edges. I can scale them on the shift x-axis, shift y-axis. So S, shift Y, and that'll just make it thicker. And then now that it's thicker, I can grab everything linked with just L, and I can scale it on the shift Y, the whole thing. Which should make it look a little bit more like how I had it before. And let's just go ahead and take it out of wireframe. Let's bring these round so they actually make sense where they're going. And we want it to be kind of a smooth transition. So. And this one here actually was joined with a little buckle. So I'm going to move it further away. And we're going to fake it being joined. Everyone's seeing it from the front or seeing it from the side. As long as it looks like it's actually joined to the actual metal, then it shouldn't look too bad, which is what I was looking at earlier. And now for this one, I'm going to turn off surface snapping, and we're going to want to bring them outwards. And we don't want to subdivide it, we don't want to extrude anything to make it look thick too early, because then we're just working with double the amount of vertices than we need, and I might have pulled that too far away. Nope, looks about right. And you know, the distance, we can always scale it in, but I'm going to go to the front view again, grab this that I just extruded, and I'm going to bring it around. I'm also going to scale it like it's being pulled in. And if you want it to be a little bit more fancy, you could add a ring loop all the way across the middle, and then you would pull that in towards like it's being pushed around by the circle here, because that's what it would actually do, but I'm not going to do that because it's just more vertices or whatever, and I'm okay with it just going generally around. So I'm going to pull that on the y-axis until it looks like it's about right, and I'm going to pull it back so that it looks like it's going round. And this is so close to the body that nobody's going to notice that's like that. And then a way that we can make it look more realistic is maybe extrude an extra little bit down here, and when we get around to texturing it, we could add a square of sewn. It's like a square of sewn material with an X sewing it together, and that'll just make it look a lot more realistic, like something's been sewn to it. And we want to do the same thing here, but just for time in the tutorial, we don't want to bring this round again. It's exactly the same there as it was here, so you can go ahead and do that. And then for this one here, I'm going to go and add a plane. So I'm going to rotate this on the x-axis as usual, scale it down, and we can see that we're still working with subdivisions. Move up here, and we're just going to mess around with subdivisions to make it look like a buckle. Completely flat, again, wouldn't say that's very good, but being completely flat is fine. We're going to add in 2 ring loops, and on the we might want to, I've done that a bit too early. I'm going to keep it like this, and I'm just going to bring it in front of everything. I rotated it before I actually added in the detail, and that just makes it really hard to model, so I forgot about that. But we're going to add in 2 ring loops, and we're going to scale that out on the x-axis, which is why we needed to do this later. Make it as thick as you want, just using 2 of them, extruding on the x-axis and then scaling on the x-axis just makes it completely even. Again, we're going to have to do it here as well, on the y-axis, z-axis even. Make sure it looks about even. And then I had a middle one, which I did 2 in the middle here. About the right thickness, I'll just keep it how it is. and then I'll cut that off at the top. And face select mode, really basic. I'll delete those faces. And that means that I can select the linked, like I did before, and I can then extrude this already and pull it out. So pull that out, see how it goes. See, it's a little bit too thick at the moment, so I'll pull it back. And we can see that's roughly what I had. If we want to add more detail in here, we're going to need a ring loop up here. That just makes that look a little bit better. We can add ring loops around the edges like this to make it look a little bit more square. Again, on the also on the inside here, but this is way too much detail. This is really a small detail compared to the rest of it. So when we're adding all these subdivisions, we might want to actually have this as a separate object with less subdivisions, because we don't need so many subdivisions, and generally the object is more square. So what we can also do with this is you can use, I'll just show you, but I won't actually do this. We can use V to rip it. As you see, that's been ripped off, and that will just make it look completely flat and sharp edges around here. So, you know, or you can use the edge split modifier, but I don't really want any of them. I just want a face here that's rotated. So I'm going to rotate on the x-axis just a little bit that way, and now pull it on the y. This is just making it look like it's stuck into the maybe a hole which joins it together. But again, talking about detail, we could also wrap, if this was real, we would have the belt or the leather. This would go through it, this part here would go through it, and then the leather would come up and it would go over this part right here. So, you know, different things you can do. But here we go. I'm going to select the linked, scale it down. Bit too much at the moment, so let's scale it back up. Front view again, rotate, and bring it up here. Scaling up. We want it to be on the outside of the leather, because that's roughly, it should be covering the edges if the leather's actually on the inside, which it should be. And that's about right. So that's how it's going to look. We still haven't extruded it yet, so let's go ahead and do that to make it look more realistic. Select the length, that's all the leather selected. And we can extrude and then press Alt S to scale along the normals. And it might scale on some angles more than others depending on what shape you've got, but it's probably scaled more here than it should do. So you can go in there and edit it better if you wanted to, but we don't necessarily need to do that, so we don't need to. And I've just realised that that is way off on the side view, because I haven't looked at it on the side view. So select the linked again, side view, and bring it all the way in. Maybe even have to rotate it. Oops, I extruded that. Rotate it from this angle. Or we can even press R twice, and you can see what kind of rolling effect that gives. But we're going to need to get it from a different angle, so I'm going to do it from this angle. And I'm going to press R twice to rotate it like this. It's quite a cool way of rotating. It just lets you move it in pretty well. So, smooth shading again, we're going to change it flat to smooth, just to reset that. And we're going to have to do that a few times, but you know, that's you know, by now that whole centre bit's done, apart from in the actual end result I had that little bit join it together, so what I'm going to do is select the link here, rotate this so that this face is roughly facing here, and now I'm going to add 2 ring loops. They're a good distance, but let's say they weren't a good distance. Another way to move edge loops is Control E and where is it? Edge slide, and that'll let you just move the edge up and down the object. So I don't know, I'll move it in a little bit, or maybe that's the same distance, I'm not sure. But that's probably moved in a little bit, and what we're going to do is extrude them out. So I'm going to bring them out as if this is just touching that, and we'll make that look a little bit better with an extra ring loop. And it's completely faked, it doesn't look very realistic close up, but if it, we could just connect those 2 things together. What my original idea was that there was like 2 loops, so a loop on this one coming off this way, and then a loop off the side of here which would be in this little part that I've extruded going that way, and that would just connect them together. But we don't really need to do that, so I'm not going to do it. And then what I did was I got the same thing here, I duplicated it, front view, and let's move it over here, and I'm going to do press rotate twice, see if I can get this to a good angle, and then rotate on the z-axis, and it's not quite the right angle, so x-axis, and let's just bring it in and rotate it on the actual thing. So you can see that it's not actually that tricky stuff that I'm doing, but it's good when you're a beginner to have it all explained, or it was for me anyway. And that is upside down, so I'm going to x-axis again, 180, and rotate this on the y-axis just a little bit, and then the z-axis, so to get that in the right place. So now that's in the right place, that's done, that's done. We just got this shoulder bit that I haven't looked at yet, and the shoulder is done just with the duplicating way that I usually do. So what I'm going to do is select the ones that we want to have around the shoulder, which I'd say maybe this might end up being a little bit bigger than my original, but that's all the shoulder, and it's going to get smaller from there, so I'm going to duplicate this, bring it upwards, and then let's bring these, I'm using shift and click there, and we could surface snap this if we wanted to, because we are going to be extruding it, but we don't need surface snapping, so I'm not going to do that just yet. So we're just going to round this off, continue to round it off by bringing it outwards and then upwards, because he's got big shoulders, or whatever muscle that is. We just make sure that it goes around that, and it's going to be thick metal this, so we don't want, again, to follow the body structure when we're creating something like that. And I duplicated it, I moved it up, so it should look okay. It looks a bit weird with it showing through, just in edit mode. But I'm going to extrude it again from there, and let's bring it over the shoulders. I wanted this to be kind of a sharp piece of metal, well, as in it's more of a square piece of metal that's going directly from his shoulders rather than a rounded one. And then there's a bit of leather underneath it, which adds in more of a rounded shape. So, that's probably okay. We could add in another diagonal one there if we wanted one, but we're going to add in more a bit later on. So I'm going to go into object mode, see what it looks like, and that's the kind of metal shape that I wanted, so I'm going to keep that. And we can actually probably just duplicate the same thing and just make it again for the leather, just more rounded. So I'm going to duplicate it once I've selected the whole thing, duplicate, scale it in a little bit, and let's bring it to a good position. So it's going to be directly underneath, which means it's going to have to be somewhere around there. Want it bigger on the y-axis, and it's going to need some rotating and things, but I think I'm just going to do it individually, so bring them down so they're underneath. And we'll just make sure I get the right shape out of this. So bring it out on the y-axis so nothing's showing through. I could even just check this in object mode because again it's hard to see. But if it is showing through at different places, we're going to extrude these upwards. It might not be that noticeable, but we can always move this one up as well. So maybe even move this whole thing up, just to make it a little bit easier, because it's actually going to be above this thick piece of leather. So that's the right shape down there. No one's good looking at it from the back, but move them anyway. And also all this part's underneath, so I'm not going to round it off up here, although it would be. I'll bring that down. And that's okay. Nobody's looking under here either, so I'm just going to make sure it works okay with the rest of it. But it's not too important. But what we've got to do, what's more important, is bring these down and make sure they're more rounded. So I make sure I've got the right vertices. See, I've got an extra one over there, so I'm going to select this whole thing, deselect two more, bring it down, and yeah, down, and maybe inwards, and then deselect two less, down, and that one's a little bit too high, so I'm going to bring that down as well. And inwards. As you can see that this is actually going to be around the most round part. It's thick leather, but I'd imagine that it would still fold with the shoulders or whatever, just a little bit more than anything else, despite how thick it is. And this is the object that is going to have another circle from the inside. So when we bring this down, we also need to make a hole here for the circle, and that's probably okay if it doesn't look too weird with this part being too far out. So let's see, that one needs to go inwards. Maybe even scale it down a little bit, but it's starting to look pretty okay. So scale that down. More inwards, and it definitely needs another ring loop in there, which is going to be pulled out and upwards. Actually, deselect that one, and that one, and now pull this upwards. And a cool new feature of the 2.8 is the join button. So what I'm going to do here is, I don't like this little straight line kind of thing here with a vertex. So we could dissolve it, or we could turn it into two by just pressing J and joining those. It's basically just like the cut tool, but a lot easier. So yeah, we could dissolve it, say if we wanted to, but that's old stuff. Object mode, make sure nothing's poking through, and it's a good distance. So what I'm going to do is extrude them now. And this metal one, I imagined it would have kind of a rim that's maybe a different type of metal, or it's a cleaner type of metal. But I didn't actually add that in because I didn't give it a texture. So I'm still going to give it the shape that I used in my my final one, but we're going to not give it a texture. So you can give it a texture if you want, but extrude it once up, make sure we've got everything selected. Extrude it once up on the z-axis to give it a little bit of thickness, and then we're going to do it one more time. If we go into face select mode and just deselect all the faces along here. And we're going to extrude it one more time out, which gives, or we could have extruded it inwards, whatever works. But extruding it one more time out will give it this little bump in the subdivision surface, which I think gives it a little bit more realisticness, makes it look a little bit more realistic. So I do that, and this part here we could make the hole now, but the actual piece of metal covers up anything that's inside, so we're going to scale it a little bit, we'll mess around with that, and by the end of it, it's going to be not noticeable that there isn't a circle made out of this. So we can select the whole thing, extrude it now, check that it's not going too far into anything, and it's not, so that's okay. We're going to want to add more ring loops once we find out where we want the circle. So let's go ahead and duplicate this, Shift D. We're going to have to sort out that we previously just made. So we don't want this little thing here. So what we can do is get fancy with the bridge tool. So I'm going to delete the vertices here, deleting the whole thing apart from these edges apparently. So let's select them, and I want to delete edges. And that should be okay. Now we can select these two ring loops, W, go to our loop tools, and bridge. Let's work that out, and that's exactly how it was before we did that, so that's good. Select the linked, grab it, and rotate on the, don't extrude it, rotate on the z-axis by, I'll just rotate it. Bring this along, we're just getting it into the right position. So I imagine that a lot of this stuff isn't that hard to do if you've got all the basics out of the way, but still, if I rotate this on the y-axis by 90, not 90, if I just rotate this on the from the front view, rotate, give it a good position, scale it down because it's a bit too big at the moment. I want it roughly in that point, so what I'm going to do is side view with 3. I'll move it to a better position over here where I know that the gap created is just going to be around the area that I want, so I'm going to cut it off with ring loops. So with that there, bring this one up. The mesh might become a little bit messy because it's a bit of a tricky thing to do to add just a complete circle out of here, but what we're going to do is delete the vertex. Yeah, we'll just delete that vertex, and that means we can bring the rest of it in, and it's going to come. We can give these. If I hide this for the moment, we can give those a face to make it look a little bit more like a circle. We could have added another one in there, but it was pretty close. If I press Alt H to bring it back, yeah, we can bring this one in here, and we can bring that one down as well. This one's clearly showing through, so I'm going to bring that one down, and even just quickly rotate this. So rotate it, bring it out outwards on the x-axis, because again we're just hiding that there's a hole in there. And I think if I go into object mode now, yeah, that's there's a little gap there, which I'll just fix now. But other than that, we've hidden it, so I'm not too bothered about. It's not ruined the shape at all. It might be considered messy, but we still got to delete this the extra bit, and then we'll be done. So underneath it isn't seen, so we can just delete that. And you can see if I hide this, it's a complete hole through. But if we look through the other side, it's not very clean. And in fact, we delete a little bit too much. Or we'll just add in another face between those four. Just quickly make sure that's not visible. So yeah, that's what I did with the other one. I knew nobody's looking underneath there. I could scale it all down and bring it closer into the shoulder. But we can see that looks, it looks pretty good. It's looking. I spent more time on my actual one than I have on this one because it's just a tutorial. But the final thing that I've done, and I'm not going to go through. Well, this is basically what I did. Is I got the back faces here, and I made a joint, which is literally just the a duplicating of this. So in fact, I could just grab the faces like I did last time, duplicate them, scale it with just scaling on the I'll just scale it outwards, bring it to a better position, bring it on the y-axis, and I'm not going to make it right now, but if we think about it, for when I'm texturing it, the actual thing, I imagined that it would be wrapping around the whole of the leather. It's just another wrap of leather, and there are seams down the sides here, which would join two parts of the exact same material together, and that would just wrap around, and it makes it look like it's a really fancy joint. Well, that was my idea anyway, and so, think about it yourself. Now I'm just going to quickly go through the leather texture, how that was simulated in nodes. So you're going to need to know nodes to do this, but if you haven't seen nodes before, or you only know a little bit, it might be good just to watch it, and then eventually you'll understand and you'll be like, yes, I've seen that. So let's go ahead and look at the materials. I think I should still have my other material selected, so we can look at that. Quickly first, we see that it's a bit hard to look at this without going through it step by step, but we can definitely see that it's glossy because you get a little bit of shine from leather, and that's mixed with these two colours here, the light and the dark. I've used a Voronoi texture to give the actual colours, and that would control which colour's dark, which colour's light. And we're just going to quickly go through this now. So I'll start from the beginning on the same texture. So we get... Okay, now we're going to make the texture, so we're going to have to start with a mix shader. So go into your shaders. I'm sure if you've seen nodes, mix shaders pretty standard, of course. Put into the surface. I'm going to add 2 diffusers for the colours, so we can shift D just like we do in the normal mode in the non-node editor. Just to duplicate, and I'll drag these colours in here. So the leather needs 2 colours. It needs to be light and dark. The lighter areas will be inside the bumps, and the darker areas of the brown, which is roughly between red and orange, if you happen to not know your colours. The lighter areas and the darker areas are split up by the Voronoi texture. So let's go ahead for a light brown. If we've made it too dark or we've made one too light, then we can always increase these in a bit, because I'm not sure at the moment that might be too dark. It might until we see the texture. and it doesn't actually start to look too good until we get to the Veranoid texture. So right now we've done that, we're actually going to start adding the Veranoid texture here. So let's go, I'm not sure if that's how it's said, but that's what it looks like it's called, and what we're going to do is add in the colour here. So you shouldn't see very much of a result right now, but what we're doing is it's split between light and dark, and where the simulated texture is. So the best way to always show off what's actually happening is to add in an emission. So I'm going to add in a shader and emission. Drag that to where it should be. Let's bring it in here, I'll mix it with the brown. So we can see that there's some lighter areas and some brown areas. And that's what we're doing, we're splitting it up, but this texture is too big at the moment. So we can pick to use the scale there, but it's not as advanced as a vector mapping. So we're going to pick the mapping with this. So let's go into that. And it didn't work very well when I didn't add in, or it doesn't work until you add in the generated textures. So what I'm going to do is, at the moment, I'm changing that to 1.2 on the x-axis. I'm going to change, on the x, 1.2 on the y, and then I'm going to change it to 2 for the scale on the z. And that's worked pretty well for the other one that I did. And now I'm going to add in a input texture coordinate, and we're going to make it generated. So that should work. And yep, it's worked there. But it's still a little bit too big. So because last time I used slightly different objects, I also used I didn't have the metal parts as part of my object. I used it, so the scale varies. We're going to have to scale these up a little bit. So let's go for 2. It might be way bigger than that. We can see we're definitely doing it, and it's because of the shape of the object and things. We're going to have to go pretty high. So I'm going to go all the way to 20. Which isn't too high yet, but we're narrowing it down, and that would be acceptable for leather. You can see the scale here. If we have a look, wait for it to load a little bit. You can see the kind of scale that's given. If we did it less on the one axis than the other, it would squash it, which leather's a lot more squashed than this looks. So, but let's make it maybe, let's see what, 25. And 25, and the actual squashing I'm going to do with this Z. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to, let's say, I've not really messed around with that too much, but 4. And mess around with it until it fits your object properly. And we can see that the lighter bits are this emission here, but on our actual shape it's going to be the darker. So I'm going to add in the darker bit. And we can see it's not looking that very right at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a colour invert, and let's go ahead and invert that. And what that's done is it's made the light bits on the inside rather than the outside. And just to finish this off, we're also going to need to, or not finish it off because we still need some shine in there. I'm going to add it to the displacement, which is also too much, so I'm going to move this upwards. It's way too much, and it's the wrong way as well, so I'll add the invert, and that'll make it look like it's the right way out rather than the other way in. And we're still working on it. We can see it's definitely really bumpy here. The way we can lessen this is adding a math node. I forget what setting this should be on, if it's multiply or not, but let's go for 0. I don't remember what I used on these one, but 0.02. See if that's changed anything. And I think it needs to be on multiply, so let's go ahead and put it on multiply. And 0.02 even. See if that's too little. Because again, it is only a little bump, we're not looking at stones or anything like that, which you could simulate with just a very high displacement. But 0.02, you can see that's looking a lot better. I'd say this isn't dark enough maybe, compared to how it was on my other one. And actually when you render it properly, it begins to look a little bit better, but I'd say that's just needs, let's go for 0.04 and double it. So it's definitely double of what we just had. And I'd say that's looking okay. It's probably okay. I'll get rid of this emission now, we don't need to see that. And I'm going to finally add in another mix shader with the... so this is my first tutorial on nodes actually, but I'm going to add in a shader and a glossy. So let's go ahead and look at that. Once I put it in the right place. So glossy. Way too shiny at the moment, way too glossy, so let's add this really low. So 0.0, might even go for the same, 0.04. I don't know, 0.08. Double it. And that's too shiny, so yeah, I'm going to bring it back to 0.04, half as shiny as that. Because we do want it to be shiny, but that was way too shiny. So let's look at the render of this. I'm going to give it a quick render, although my computer doesn't do quick renders. But we can see it's a lot darker in the render than it was on what I was just showing you. And with a bit of tweaking of the colours to what you want it to look like, you can make that look a lot more like leather. Maybe the displacement's too high there, I can't tell. Maybe I made it lower on my original. And maybe the colours are too dark, it's up to you. So mess around with that, but we can definitely see that's how we simulate leather. And I actually added in one more little trick with another mix shader. If we look at this, so I'm going to bring the value here down, 0.03, and let's go with adding in another mix shader for this very final little touch, which is useful for leather. And it's going to be really weak as well, so I guess that's pretty much okay, 0.04. Although actually that's not going to be in the final one, so let's go ahead and add in a layer weight and facing, and basically it just decides what material it is by what's facing your way. So facing, if it's facing your way, it's going to be fully that material, and if it's not facing your way, then it's not going to be that material. Let's see that maybe with an emission or something, just so we can definitely see what's happening. And this is a pretty long tutorial, but I hope you're finding all this useful. Shader, emission, I'll add it in up here, and I'll just bring it into there. So you can see all these edges that are facing away, they are emitting, and the more they go away, the more they emit. So it's way too high at the moment, so I'm going to change it to 0.0, I don't know, 3. And that's just going to give that little whiteness around the edges there. Of course we don't want it to be an emission, and maybe 0.03 is too strong. It takes a little bit of tweaking as well, but let's go ahead and say that's about fine, as long as it's not an emission. Oops. As long as it's not an emission, then it won't be so noticeable. So let's add in a shader of diffuse. Bring it up here just so it's out of the way. And my nodes are a little bit messy, but you know, that's how it's done. And that should be pretty much okay. So I'm going to move these the other way around so they're a little cleaner. And that's roughly how it's done when I render this. You can remember that it's darker in the render than it is outside the render. So okay, so that's it for this tutorial. I know it was pretty long and I hope you enjoyed it. I can do more tutorials like this if you want. I haven't made any tutorials in a while because I've been posting to DeviantArt and to things like Reddit with competition entries and so on. You know, just messing around in Blender. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.